10 reasons why life in the American Old West was actually terrible. When we think of the Wild West, we often picture rugged pioneers and exciting adventures, filled with the promise of freedom and discovery. But the truth behind frontier life is far darker than the romanticized stories we've been told. From deadly diseases to dangerous mining accidents, life in the American West was brutal and unforgiving. The true story of those who ventured westward is one of survival against impossible odds. Ready to uncover the harsh realities that shaped the American frontier? Let's explore the side of history they left out. Housing was inadequate. Housing on the frontier was anything but ideal. When homesteaders claimed a plot of land, they had just 5 years to improve it and construct a dwelling. The problem? Most of these settlers had extremely limited funds, and nearly half couldn't hold on to their claims long enough to meet the requirement. Money was tight, so building a home became a matter of necessity, not luxury. In areas where timber was hard to come by, settlers turned to the one resource they had plenty of: the ground beneath their feet. They built homes from sod, blocks of earth cut from the prairie. These sod houses, often called soddies, weren't much to brag about. They were dark, damp, and teeming with bugs and rodents. When it rained, the roofs often leaked, and sometimes the walls even gave way, leaving the family exposed to the elements. While these makeshift homes served as basic shelter, they offered little in the way of comfort or real protection. Life in a sod house was a constant reminder of the harsh realities of frontier living, where survival always came first. In areas where timber was plentiful, settlers opted for log cabins over sod houses. But forget the cozy image often shown in movies. Building a log cabin was a back-breaking ordeal. Settlers had to chop down trees using basic hand tools like axes, then transport heavy stones to construct a sturdy foundation and a fireplace. Each log could weigh over 500 pounds, and for many pioneers, there was no one to help shoulder the load. This meant progress was painstakingly slow and physically exhausting. When the cabin was finally complete, it was far from luxurious. Most were small, single-room structures measuring around 10 by 20 feet, with ceilings just 6 to 10 feet high. Floors were nothing more than packed dirt, and windows? Those were a rare luxury. It could take years before settlers could afford glass panes. To make matters even more challenging, pioneer families were often large, with up to 10 children sharing that cramped, single space. Cooking, eating, sleeping, and daily chores all happened within those 4 walls, leaving little room for privacy or comfort. The romanticized vision of a snug frontier cabin hides the harsh, crowded, and labor-intensive reality of life on the frontier. Winters were brutal. Frontier winters were anything but cozy. While popular depictions might show warm cabins with fires crackling, the reality was far more punishing. The log walls of frontier cabins provided almost no insulation, barely holding back the relentless wind. Inside, the temperature often felt as frigid as it did outdoors. Even a roaring fire couldn't do much to warm the space, since heat quickly escaped through poorly sealed walls and drafty roofs. Sod houses, although slightly better insulated than log cabins, brought their own issues. Their roofs frequently leaked during rain or snow, leaving families cold and damp. Staying warm was a constant battle, and a fire was absolutely essential for survival. To keep it burning through the long winter months, settlers needed an enormous stockpile of wood, often as large as the cabin itself. On the vast, treeless prairie, wood was scarce and precious. Homesteaders had to get creative, turning to alternative fuels like dried buffalo dung or buffalo chips. While resourceful, this fuel barely produced enough heat to make a difference. Surviving the winter on the frontier was grueling. The bitter cold seeped into every aspect of daily life, making an already difficult existence even more miserable. Frontier families faced each winter with grit and determination, knowing that enduring the cold was a fight for survival. Family separation. Family separation was one of the most heart-wrenching realities of pioneer life. When families decided to head west, they often did so knowing they might never see their loved ones again. This emotional burden was especially hard on women, as their diaries and letters frequently reveal. Once settled, the demands of farming and homesteading consumed nearly every waking moment, leaving little to no time for visits or reunions. Traveling back home by wagon wasn't just slow, it was exhausting and nearly impossible for most. The idea of a quick trip to reconnect with family was out of reach. Although letters provided some connection, the postal system of the time was unreliable and agonizingly slow. News from home could take months to arrive, and the delay only deepened the sense of disconnection. For many pioneers, the distance wasn't just physical, it was emotional, creating an overwhelming sense of loneliness and isolation. The move westward wasn't just a geographical shift, it was often a permanent farewell to the life they once knew. The vastness of the frontier and the slow pace of life meant that for many, the ties to family and friends back home were severed forever, adding a heavy emotional toll to the challenges of frontier living. Which part of frontier life do you think was the most dangerous or difficult to endure? Grueling daily chores. Life on the frontier was defined by relentless labor, leaving pioneers physically and emotionally drained. Depression was a common struggle, and it's easy to see why. Daily chores were grueling and never-ending. For most, survival revolved around ensuring there was enough food on the table, a task that dominated nearly every waking moment. The harsh, unforgiving land of the Midwest demanded constant work. Men spent their days farming and hunting to provide sustenance, while women shouldered an equally heavy load. They gathered plants, prepared meals, preserved food, and managed the household, all while facing the unending challenges of the seasons. Winter brought even more intense demands. Women spent countless hours canning fruits to store for the cold months ahead. Preserving meat through salting, brining, or smoking required meticulous care and time. Keeping a fire burning was crucial for both warmth and cooking, and tending it often consumed a large portion of the day. But food preparation was just one part of a long list of chores. Women were also responsible for sewing and mending clothing by hand, a painstaking but essential task. Laundry was no easier. Without running water, it became a labor-intensive process. Even cleaning, which we take for granted today, was backbreaking, as they lacked modern tools like vacuums. Caring for livestock added yet another layer of responsibility to their already overwhelming workload. There were no breaks, no vacations, and no time to relax. Every day was a grind, a continuous cycle of labor that left little room for joy or leisure. This endless toil wore down the body and the spirit, casting a harsh shadow over the romanticized image of pioneer life. In truth, it was a life of profound sacrifice, duty, and hardship, driven by the unyielding demands of survival. Deaths and disease were common. Life on the frontier was fraught with danger, and death was an all too familiar shadow for homesteaders. Accidents were a constant threat, with risks lurking in every daily task. Something as routine as chopping wood with an axe or navigating a wagon could turn deadly in an instant. A moment of mishap with a wagon wheel or tool could cause injuries that, without proper medical care, often proved fatal. Illness was another unrelenting danger. The cramped and unsanitary living conditions of frontier families meant that if one person fell sick, the disease could quickly spread to everyone. Entire families were sometimes wiped out by a single outbreak. On wagon trains, the risks were even greater. Hundreds of people traveled together, sharing limited water in close quarters, which created the perfect breeding ground for deadly diseases like cholera and dysentery. Dysentery, often dismissed in modern times, was a grave and deadly condition. Severe diarrhea quickly led to dehydration, and without treatment, death could follow in a matter of days. When disease struck a wagon train, the results were devastating. Those who died were buried hastily in shallow graves along the trail, but these resting places were far from peaceful. Wolves, ever present on the plains, would often dig up the remains, adding another layer of horror to an already grim reality. These brutal deaths were a stark reminder of how unforgiving frontier life could be. For those who sought a new beginning in the West, the price of freedom and opportunity often came at the highest cost. The frontier wasn't just a place of hope and promise. It was a battleground of survival where every misstep could be fatal. Please comment 1 to let me know you'll be watching this video until the end. Loneliness and depression. Life on the frontier was often a lonely and isolating experience, particularly for pioneers who spent their days consumed by endless chores. The demands of maintaining homes and lands left little time for visiting neighbors or participating in community activities. Adding to this isolation was the sheer physical distance between homesteads. Under the Homestead Act of 1862, married couples were granted 320 acres of land and later up to 640 acres under the Timber Culture Act of 1873. While this land offered opportunity, it also ensured that homes were spaced far apart, typically about half a mile from one another, making casual visits impractical. Occasionally, community gatherings like quilting bees or barn raisings provided a break from solitude. These events were cherished for the sense of connection they offered. However, such opportunities were seasonal and came to an abrupt halt during the long, harsh winters when the frontier's isolation grew even more profound. Women felt the sting of loneliness most acutely. Their responsibilities tied them to the home, limiting their chances for social interaction or personal respite. With their lives revolving around domestic tasks, the absence of companionship and recreation took a heavy toll. In the 1800s, mental health was poorly understood, and there was little recognition of the emotional burdens pioneers faced. However, diaries and letters from the time reveal a recurring theme of loneliness and despair. For many settlers, the vast open spaces that symbolized freedom also created an emotional wilderness, leaving them to grapple with feelings of profound isolation in their quest for a new life on the frontier. Frequent starvation. For pioneers, survival often hinged on the crops they could grow and the goods they could trade for essentials at the local general store. However, access to these stores was far from guaranteed. Many pioneers lived miles away from town, with trading trips occurring only a few times a year, sometimes as little as twice. When these trips were possible, they often involved exchanging harvested crops for items like food, tools, and clothing. Yet, these stores were far from reliable. To cut costs, Some merchants would adulterate their supplies with fillers like sawdust or plaster, making it difficult for settlers to get quality goods. But the real danger was a bad harvest. If crops failed or didn't yield enough to trade, pioneers were left without the basics they needed to survive. The weather, as always, was a major factor, and many settlers faced crop shortages they couldn't control. Natural disasters such as droughts and, even worse, swarms of locusts could devastate entire fields in a matter of hours. In 1874, one of the worst locust swarms in history struck the prairies. The sky darkened as billions of insects descended, stripping crops bare and leaving farmers with nothing. Despite the settlers' hard work, no amount of effort could overcome such overwhelming forces of nature. Starvation became a very real and constant threat as crops failed, supplies dwindled, and survival depended on the unpredictable forces of the land. For many pioneers, hunger and scarcity were just part of the harsh reality of frontier life. Dealing with waste. While cities in the eastern United States were advancing with modern plumbing systems and sewage infrastructure, homesteaders on the frontier faced much more primitive conditions. Most families relied on simple outhouses, often little more than small wooden structures in their backyards, as their only means of sanitation. In some cases, settlers didn't even bother to build proper outhouses, instead resorting to makeshift solutions. Homesteading also meant the ownership of livestock, which inevitably led to the accumulation of manure. Families often stored buffalo chips or animal waste near their homes, using them as a fuel source or simply as a place to dispose of waste. However, the summer months brought new challenges. As the waste decomposed, it released a strong, unpleasant odor that lingered in the air, creating a foul-smelling and unsanitary environment. The stench not only attracted flies and mosquitoes, but also seeped into the homes, making it difficult to escape the discomfort. With little money to afford window screens, families had no defense against the insects that made their lives even more unbearable. The pests became a constant nuisance, particularly in the warmer months when the air was thick with them. But the difficulties didn't end with the summer heat. During winter, the freezing cold created a new set of problems. The outhouse seats would freeze over, coating the surfaces with frozen waste. In some cases, settlers had to use shovels to scrape away the waste just to be able to use the facilities. Sanitation was a daily struggle for pioneers, and the lack of modern conveniences made maintaining even basic hygiene a monumental challenge. Native American attacks. The myth of the American frontier often oversimplifies and distorts the reality of Native American experiences, presenting them as a single, hostile force impeding the progress of brave pioneers. This narrative paints a picture of the West as a wild, untamed land ready to be conquered, but it overlooks the far more complex and tragic history of the native people who lived there. For Native Americans, life in the West was marked by immense hardship, driven by the forced removal from their ancestral lands and the violence that accompanied this displacement. Rather than a simple clash between settlers and native tribes, the story is one of systematic injustice. Native communities were coerced and driven from their homes, and when they resisted, they often faced brutal consequences. Treaties signed between the U.S. government and native tribes were frequently broken, and promises made were quickly forgotten. One of the most devastating actions taken by the government was the deliberate destruction of the buffalo population. The buffalo was essential to the survival and culture of many native tribes, providing food, clothing, and tools. The government's effort to decimate this population was a strategic move to undermine indigenous resistance and force Native Americans into submission. While pioneers faced many challenges in settling the West, it's crucial to understand that these difficulties were often intertwined with the profound injustices and violence inflicted upon Native American communities. The full scope of the history of the frontier can't be appreciated without acknowledging the immense suffering and loss endured by the native peoples. Water was dirty and hard to come by. Accessing clean water was one of the constant and overwhelming struggles for settlers on the frontier, especially for those who didn't settle near rivers or other readily available water sources. In these cases, digging wells near their homes was the primary solution, but the water quality from these wells was often poor. The groundwater was frequently contaminated, making it less than ideal for drinking or other daily needs. Rainwater provided another potential source, but collecting and storing it came with its own set of problems. The containers used for rainwater would quickly attract mosquitoes and often accumulate dirt and debris, further complicating efforts to maintain a clean and reliable water supply. As a result, settlers often had to make long trips to distant water sources to meet their needs, adding yet another layer of difficulty to their already grueling lives. With water in such limited supply, hygiene became a secondary concern. Bathing was typically reserved for once a week, with entire families sharing the same water, which would also be reused for washing clothes. These harsh conditions made every drop of water precious and highlighted the extreme challenges of life on the frontier, where the scarcity of clean water underscored the daily hardships that settlers faced. After hearing about the real challenges of frontier life, do you still romanticize the idea of being a pioneer? Please comment yes or no. Why you wouldn't survive life in the Wild West? Getting to the American West was no easy feat. The journey was dangerous and deadly, especially for families traveling in covered wagons. The primary routes, like the Oregon Trail, the Mormon Pioneer Trail, and the California Trail, formed a vast network that has been referred to as the nation's longest graveyard. Between the 1840s and 1860s, around 400,000 people made the arduous trek westward, but only about 1 in 10 survived the journey. Along the 2,000-mile stretch, it's estimated that between 10 and 15 people died per mile, falling victim to a variety of harsh conditions. Disease was the leading cause of death. With limited access to food and a lack of clean drinking water, the settlers often found themselves in unsanitary environments that acted as breeding grounds for illness. Cholera, which spreads through contaminated water, was the deadliest of these diseases. People could contract cholera in the morning and be dead by noon. It was swift and brutal, claiming many lives before settlers even realized they were sick. But disease wasn't the only danger. Accidental firearm wounds were another major cause of death. Many pioneers feared Native Americans, so they traveled with large arsenals of weapons for protection. However, in reality, most Native Americans along the trails were peaceful and even offered help to the settlers, providing food, guidance, and assistance crossing rivers. Sadly, the real danger came from the settlers' own weapons. There were frequent misfires, accidental discharges, and hunting accidents. Often, if a settler didn't die from the immediate injury, infection would soon take over, leading to death soon after. One of the most infamous Wild West towns was Dodge City, Kansas. Known for its lawlessness and high crime rate, the phrase "getting out of Dodge" became a popular way to say someone was escaping a bad situation. Dodge City gained this notorious reputation quickly after its founding in 1872. Before it was a town, it had served as a fort, playing a significant role in battles between Native Americans and settlers. Initially, Dodge was a major buffalo trading post. and by 1876, over 1.5 million buffalo hides passed through the town. But by the late 1870s, the buffalo were almost wiped out, and the town shifted to cattle trading. In Dodge's first year as an official town, there was no law enforcement. The rapid connection to the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railroad led to explosive growth, but also attracted less than desirable characters. Violence was rampant, with duels and deaths happening regularly. These events gave the town a reputation for danger, and the first cemetery was even dubbed Boot Hill due to the number of people who died with their boots on. The press jumped on the lawlessness, sensationalizing the violence and turning Dodge City into a symbol of Wild West chaos. One popular joke even suggested that anyone wishing to visit needed a letter of introduction, a double-barreled shotgun, and a Colt revolver. To bring some order to the chaos, lawman Wyatt Earp was eventually called in to restore peace. He banned firearms in certain parts of the town, and the newly constructed jails soon filled up. Dodge City eventually became a more organized community, but its reputation had already been solidified by the media and Hollywood, forever cementing it as the quintessential Wild West town. Saloons were a hallmark of the Wild West, offering not just a place to drink, but a social hub for settlers and travelers alike. Inspired by Mexican cantinas, the first saloon opened in Wyoming in 1822 and spread rapidly through frontier towns. By the 1880s, saloons became the focal point of many towns. In Livingston, Montana, with just 3,000 people, there were 33 saloons, and Leavenworth, Kansas, with 16,500 residents, had an astonishing 150. Due to unreliable supply chains and scarce resources, saloon owners had to get creative. Many diluted their alcohol with dangerous substances like turpentine, formaldehyde, and even gunpowder, making for some unpleasant and potentially deadly drinking experiences. The California Gold Rush, starting in 1848, brought thousands of hopeful miners westward, hoping to strike it rich. The population of California exploded, from 800 to 300,000 in less than a decade. But the mining camps were dangerous places. Health issues from stone dust were rampant, causing lung diseases and cancers, while accidents like mine fires, cave-ins, and dynamite explosions claimed countless lives. The environmental impact was also devastating, as indigenous populations in California, once numbering about 150,000, were decimated by disease, violence, and displacement, with 1/3 perishing in just 20 years. The gold rush also fueled the exploitation of women in the region, many of whom turned to prostitution for survival. These women, often young and poor, faced extreme hardships and a high incidence of venereal diseases, with many using toxic chemicals like mercury and cyanide in a futile attempt to protect themselves. Tragically, the risks posed by these chemicals often caused more harm than the diseases they tried to prevent. The suffering of Native Americans during this time cannot be overstated. Before European contact, the indigenous population of North America was estimated to be between 2 million and 18 million, but by 1900, fewer than 300,000 remained. European diseases, particularly smallpox, ravaged indigenous communities, and their traditional ways of life were violently disrupted by settlers and the U.S. government. Many indigenous people were displaced from their lands, and some were forced into boarding schools with the cruel motto, "Kill the Indian, save the man." These schools aimed to civilize indigenous children by erasing their cultures and languages, leaving a dark legacy of forced assimilation that continues to affect Native communities today.
What early pioneers ate to survive the Old West? Ever wonder what it took to survive on the wild frontier? Forget fancy restaurants and grocery stores. Pioneers had to get creative with their cooking. From strange pies to unexpected meat dishes, their culinary ingenuity was key to their survival. Join us as we explore the bizarre and fascinating world of Old West cuisine. But be warned, some of these dishes might make your stomach churn. Subscribe to Who Remember, and let us know in the comments what other food history mysteries you'd like us to explore. Mountain oysters. You might also hear them called prairie oysters or cowboy caviar, but no matter the name, they're a unique and, let's say, adventurous part of Western cuisine. Now, what exactly are mountain oysters? Well, they're not oysters at all. They're actually bull-calf testicles. Yes, you heard that right. Back in the Old West, cowboys and ranchers were resourceful and weren't afraid to try anything when it came to food. They found that these, shall we say, underappreciated parts of the bull could be quite tasty when prepared properly. Typically, mountain oysters were peeled, coated in batter, and deep fried until golden brown and crispy. This created a surprisingly flavorful and satisfying snack that became a favorite among those who dared to try it. Even today, you can find mountain oysters on menus in some parts of the West, often served as appetizers at festivals, rodeos, and even some restaurants and bars. While they might not be everyone's cup of tea, mountain oysters are a fascinating part of Western history and a testament to the pioneers' adventurous spirit. Salted pork. Let's talk about a true workhorse of the pioneer pantry, salted pork. This humble preserved meat was a cornerstone of the diet in the Old West, providing essential sustenance during long journeys and challenging living conditions. Before the days of refrigeration, keeping meat from spoiling was a top priority, and salt was the pioneer's best friend. Salted pork was made by curing fresh pork with generous amounts of salt, which drew out moisture and created an environment where bacteria couldn't thrive. Sometimes the meat was also smoked for added flavor and preservation power. This process allowed pioneers to store pork for months, even years, without worrying about it going bad. Imagine traveling the Oregon Trail with a wagon full of salted pork. It was lightweight, easy to transport, and a reliable source of protein when fresh meat was a luxury. Salted pork could be added to stews, soups, or simply fried up for a quick and satisfying meal. It was often paired with hardtack or beans, creating a hearty and filling combination that kept those pioneers going. Now, salted pork wasn't exactly a culinary masterpiece. The high salt content could be tough on the body, and the flavor could get a bit monotonous after a while. But pioneers were resourceful and found ways to supplement their diet with fresh vegetables, wild game, or fish whenever possible. Today, while we have modern refrigeration, salted pork still holds a special place in culinary history. It's a reminder of the ingenuity and resilience of those who settled the American West and the importance of food preservation in their survival. Frizzled beef and frying pan bread. Let's talk about a quick and easy snack that was a favorite among cowboys and pioneers: frizzled beef. This simple dish was a lifesaver on the trail, providing a hearty and flavorful meal with minimal ingredients and fuss. Frizzled beef was made with dried meat, cooked in a mixture of milk, butter, and flour, and served over toast. It was a surprisingly nutritious meal, especially compared to some of the other fare available at the time. And the best part, the ingredients were easy to transport, with only the milk being perishable. This made it a perfect meal for those on the move. Today, you might find modern versions of frizzled beef with added ingredients like sautéed onions or peas, served over a baked potato instead of toast. It can also be made with chipped beef and served with gravy. Our friends in the military might even recognize it as SOS or shit on a shingle, a testament to its versatility and enduring popularity. Now, let's switch gears and talk about another staple of the pioneer diet: frying pan bread or bannock. Ovens weren't exactly a common sight on the trail, so pioneers got creative and cooked their bread in a frying pan. This simple bread was made with flour, baking powder, salt, and water. Pioneers typically used whole wheat flour, resulting in a denser and more filling bread that provided sustained energy for their long journeys. Frying pan bread was a versatile and adaptable dish, perfect for life on the frontier. It could be cooked over an open fire or on a stovetop, and it could be eaten plain or with various toppings. All right, folks, gather round for a tasty tale from the Old West. Imagine you're sitting by the campfire and cookie hollers, grubs up, but instead of a steaming plate, you get wiggly dessert. That's right, we're talking about calf's foot jelly, the pioneer's answer to Jell-O before Jell-O was even a twinkle in its inventor's eye. Now, don't go thinking this is some newfangled concoction. Our resourceful ancestors whipped this up way back when, using what they had on hand. Picture this: you take some eggs, squeeze in some zesty lemon, sprinkle in sugar and spices, and here's the kicker: you boil up some calf's feet to get that all-important gelatin. Mix it all together once it's cooled, and bam! You've got yourself a genuine frontier delicacy. Some fancy pants cooks even jazzed it up with white wine, extra seasonings, and fluffy egg whites. Heck, one Virginia recipe book suggests throwing in crushed eggshells. Waste not, want not, I reckon. But if you want the real deal, look no further than Mrs. J. Chadwick's 1853 cookbook. She lays it out step by step, from boiling those feet to straining the mix through a flannel bag. It's a labor of love, but the pioneers didn't shy away from hard work, especially when it came to satisfying their sweet tooth. Now, this jelly treat wasn't just for those with a hankering for something sweet. Long before cowboys were roaming the range, folks were making savory versions called pizza. And believe it or not, you can still find this old-timey dish in some Jewish tallis today. So next time you're slurping down some Jell-O, tip your hat to those ingenious pioneers who turned hooves into a heavenly dessert. They may not have had convenience foods, but by golly, they sure knew how to make do with what they had. Bear head cheese. It's a traditional dish made from the leftover meat from the head and face of an animal, in this case a bear. In the Old West, pioneers were experts at using every part of the animal, and bear head cheese was a way to preserve and enjoy the flavorful meat from the bear's head. The process involved soaking the meat in brine, rinsing it, and then boiling it down. The cooked meat was then chopped, seasoned, and cooled in a pan or mold, sometimes with a savory gelatin called aspic added for extra texture. Bear head cheese was a valuable source of protein and nutrients for pioneer families. Bears provided a lot of meat, and making head cheese ensured that nothing went to waste. It was also a great way to preserve the meat for long journeys or lean times. While you might not find bear head cheese on your local grocery store shelves today, it's still enjoyed in some parts of the world. It's a reminder of the ingenuity and resourcefulness of the pioneers, who knew how to make the most of every part of the animal and create delicious and nutritious meals from seemingly unlikely ingredients. These critters were plentiful in the Old West, making them a valuable source of food for those who were brave enough to hunt them. Jackrabbits were relatively easy to catch, and their lean meat could be roasted or cooked in a variety of ways, providing a much-needed source of protein for those on the frontier. But there was a catch. Eating too much jackrabbit meat could lead to a condition known as rabbit starvation. Now, don't let the name fool you. It's not that you'd starve from eating rabbit. Instead, it's a type of protein poisoning that occurs when you consume a diet that's too high in protein and lacking in other essential nutrients. Turns out jackrabbit meat is so lean that it could cause this condition in some settlers who relied on it too heavily. They'd experience symptoms of extreme hunger, even though they were consuming enough calories. It's a fascinating example of how even a seemingly abundant food source can have its downsides if not consumed as part of a balanced diet. Despite the risks of rabbit starvation, jackrabbits remained an important part of the pioneer diet, and their meat is still enjoyed in some parts of the world today. It's a reminder that survival in the Old West required resourcefulness, adaptability, and a good understanding of the foods available. What modern dishes do you think have surprising origins in pioneer cuisine? Perpetual soup. Let's dive into a fascinating culinary tradition that sustained pioneers and settlers: perpetual soup. Also known as perpetual stew, this ingenious method involved keeping a pot of broth simmering continuously, adding ingredients and flavors as needed. Imagine a large pot bubbling away on a hearth, filled with a rich and ever-evolving broth. This was the heart of many pioneer kitchens, providing a constant source of nourishment and warmth. The concept is simple. Start with leftover meats, bones, and vegetables. Simmer them together to create a flavorful base. And then, as the soup is consumed, add more ingredients to replenish it. This not only minimized waste, but also allowed the flavors to deepen and meld over time, creating a truly unique and complex broth. Pioneers would toss in whatever scraps they had on hand: meat trimmings, vegetable peels, foraged herbs, anything to keep the perpetual soup pot going. The result was a hearty and nutritious meal that could feed a family for days or even weeks. A lifesaver during long journeys or in remote settlements. While the concept is simple, perpetual soup requires careful attention. Maintaining a consistent simmer is crucial to prevent spoilage, and older ingredients need to be removed regularly to ensure the broth's quality. Today, perpetual soup is experiencing a revival as people embrace sustainable cooking practices and seek to reduce food waste. Some communities even hold gatherings where participants contribute ingredients to a communal pot, creating a shared experience around food that echoes the traditions of the past. Perpetual soup is more than just a cooking method. It's a testament to resourcefulness and adaptability. It's a reminder that delicious and nourishing meals can be created from seemingly humble ingredients, and that food can be a source of community and connection. Vinegar pie. You see, out on the frontier, fresh fruit wasn't always easy to come by. But those resourceful pioneers weren't about to let a little thing like a lack of apples stop them from enjoying a good slice of pie. They discovered that apple cider vinegar, which was usually used for medicine or cleaning, could actually be transformed into a surprisingly tasty pie filling. That's right, vinegar pie. The vinegar's tart, apple-like flavor, when mixed with sugar and spices, created a dessert that was both refreshing and satisfying. It might sound a little strange, but it was a clever way to enjoy a taste of something sweet when fresh fruit was scarce. And guess what? Vinegar pie isn't just a thing of the past. Folks still make it today, even famous cooks like Martha Stewart. Her recipe uses butter instead of the lard that pioneers likely used, but it still captures the essence of this unique frontier dessert. So, if you're looking for a pie with a unique flavor and a fascinating history, give vinegar pie a try. It's a delicious reminder of the pioneers' creativity and their ability to make something delicious out of the most unexpected ingredients. What pioneer dish surprised you the most, and would you ever be brave enough to try it? Roast skunk. Let's chew the fat about a critter that most folks nowadays wouldn't touch with a 10-foot pole: the humble skunk. Now, before you wrinkle your nose, let me tell you that our pioneer ancestors weren't exactly picky eaters. When you're out in the wild frontier, your dinner menu is whatever Mother Nature serves up, and sometimes that includes old Pepe Le Pew himself. Believe it or not, these stinky little varmints pack a decent amount of meat on their bones. Not quite a holiday ham, mind you, but enough to fill a hungry belly. Now, here's the kicker. There's actually an old pioneer recipe book that spills the beans on how to roast these odorous critters. And let me tell you, the most important step ain't the seasoning. It's removing those pesky scent glands before you even think about firing up the oven. Once you've taken care of that little detail, throw in some carrots, and you've got yourself a genuine frontier feast. Now, I know what you're thinking. Ain't no way I'm putting that in my mouth. But hold your horses there, partner. According to a 1959 issue of Boys Life magazine, skunk meat is surprisingly tasty, light and well-flavored, they say, and even better than possum or raccoon. Now, that might not be saying much, but it just goes to show that our ancestors knew how to make the best of what they had. So next time you're sitting down to a nice roast chicken, spare a thought for those tough-as-nails pioneers who turned even the smelliest of situations into a survivalist supper. Who knows? Maybe someday skunk a la mode will be the next big food trend. Till then, I reckon we'll stick to our beef and chicken, but let's raise a glass to the brave souls who paved the way with their adventurous palates. Herbs and foraged greens. Pioneers were skilled foragers, identifying and gathering wild greens like dandelions, lamb's quarters, and purslane. These unassuming plants were nutritional powerhouses, packed with vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants. Dandelion greens, for example, are a rich source of vitamins A, C, and K, as well as calcium and iron. Pioneers would harvest these greens in the spring and early summer, enjoying them fresh in salads or adding them to stews and soups for extra flavor and nutrition. Wild herbs like garlic, clover, and nettles also found their way into the pioneer diet, adding variety and depth to meals. These herbs were used not only for seasoning, but also as traditional remedies for common ailments. Foraging wasn't just about finding food. It was about connecting with nature. Pioneers learned to observe the seasons, understand plant life cycles, and harvest sustainably, ensuring the continued abundance of these valuable resources. This knowledge was passed down through generations, fostering a deep respect for the land and its bounty. Today, foraging is experiencing a revival as people rediscover the joy of connecting with nature and the nutritional benefits of wild plants. Many chefs are incorporating foraged greens into their dishes, celebrating their unique flavors and textures. The legacy of pioneer foraging reminds us of the resourcefulness and adaptability of those who settled the West. They understood the importance of utilizing nature's gifts to enhance their health and well-being, leaving behind a tradition that continues to inspire us today. Sweet potato coffee. Back in the wild days of the frontier, our pioneer pals couldn't just mosey on down to the local cafe for their morning joe. No siree, real coffee beans were about as scarce as hen's teeth out on the plains. But did that stop our resourceful ancestors from getting their daily jolt? Not on your life. These clever folks got creative, turned into all sorts of unlikely sources for their coffee fix. Now hold on to your hats, cause one of the most ingenious substitutes they cooked up was sweet potato coffee. I kid you not. These frontier baristas would take sweet potatoes, peel 'em, cook 'em, mash 'em, and dry 'em out. Then they'd shape 'em into little patties, mix in some rye flour for good measure, dry 'em again, and grind 'em up finer than prairie dust. Now, I won't lie to you, it wasn't exactly a match for your fancy triple-shot espresso, but some folks took a shine to it, especially when times were tough. There's even a recipe from 1861 in a Georgia paper that'll teach you how to stretch your coffee rations by mixing in this sweet potato concoction. Imagine that. You could brew up 8 or 9 cups of coffee with just a smidge of the real deal and a handful of ground taters. So next time you're sipping on your store-bought brew, spare a thought for those inventive pioneers. They may not have had Starbucks, but by golly, they had spirit and sweet potatoes. Who knows, maybe one day we'll see ye olde sweet potato latte on a hipster cafe menu. After all, what goes around comes around. And those frontier folks might been onto something with their root vegetable java. Cheap sorrel pie. Now, imagine you're out on the frontier, hankering for a slice of good old lemon pie. But there ain't a yellow citrus in sight. What's a resourceful settler to do? Well, let me tell you, our clever ancestors weren't about to let a little thing like a lemon shortage sour their dessert plans. They put their thinking caps on and came up with a substitution that knocked your socks off: sheep sorrel pie. Now don't go looking for any woolly creatures in this recipe. Sheep sorrel's actually a little flowering plant, kin to buckwheat, that was as common as tumbleweeds in the Old West. These crafty cooks would gather up the leaves, give 'em a good shredding, and bake 'em right into a pie crust. The result? A tart, mouth-puckering treat that fooled even the pickiest pie connoisseur into thinking they were bitten into a slice of lemony heaven. Sure, it might not have been the fancy lemon meringue you'd find at your local diner nowadays, but let me tell you, when you're out on the prairie with nothing but your wits and a sweet craving, sheep sorrel pie was like stricken culinary gold. It just goes to show that our pioneer ancestors could whip up a delicious dessert faster than you can say pass the pie tin. So next time life hands you lemons, or doesn't in this case, remember the ingenuity of those frontier folk. They turned a humble weed into a dessert worthy of any chuck wagon feast. A cornbread. Now, let's talk about a bread that's a little bit different. You see, out on the frontier, traditional flour wasn't always readily available, but those resourceful pioneers weren't about to go without their daily bread. They turned to the mighty oak tree and its humble acorns to create a unique and surprisingly nutritious bread. The idea of using acorns for flour wasn't new, but it was a lifesaver for those pioneers. Corns were plentiful in the West, and with a little bit of know-how, they could be transformed into a tasty and versatile flour. The process involved roasting the acorns to remove their natural bitterness, then grinding them into a fine meal. This acorn flour could then be used to make bread, cakes, and other baked goods. A corn bread might not have been as light and fluffy as traditional wheat bread, but it was a hearty and nutritious alternative that kept those pioneers going. It's a testament to their resourcefulness and ability to make the most of what nature provided. Beef tea. This was a hearty and nourishing beverage that played an important role in the lives of pioneers. Beef tea was made by boiling thin strips of salted beef in water, then straining the liquid to create a flavorful broth. It was a simple and inexpensive way to extract the goodness from beef, making it a valuable source of nutrients, especially when fresh meat was scarce. Pioneers often used beef tea as a supplement for those with weak constitutions or to stimulate appetites. It was also considered a remedy for various illnesses, providing a comforting and restorative drink for those feeling under the weather. And the best part, beef tea wasn't limited to just beef. When beef wasn't available, pioneers could substitute lamb, chicken, or even vegetables to create a similar nourishing broth. So, next time you're looking for a warm and comforting drink with a rich history, consider trying beef tea. It's a simple yet flavorful beverage that played a vital role in the lives of those who settled the West, and it might just surprise you with its versatility and health benefits. You see, before the days of refrigeration, fresh meat was a precious commodity on the frontier. It was difficult to transport and prone to spoiling, especially on long wagon journeys. While deer and buffalo were prized game animals, they weren't always readily available in every area. Enter the squirrel. These small, agile creatures were plentiful in many parts of the West, and they became a valuable source of fresh meat for pioneers when other options were scarce. Hunters developed ingenious methods for catching squirrels, often involving clipping the bark beneath a squirrel on a tree branch, causing it to lose its footing and fall. They would then try to shoot the squirrel without damaging too much of its meat, a testament to their skill and marksmanship. Squirrel meat might not have been as plentiful as buffalo or deer, but it provided a welcome change from the monotony of preserved meats and other staples of the pioneer diet. It's a fascinating example of how those who settled the West learned to adapt and make use of the resources available to them, even the smallest and seemingly insignificant ones. Hardtack. This humble biscuit may not sound glamorous, but it played a vital role in the survival and success of those who ventured into the American West. Hardtack is essentially a super tough cracker made from flour, water, and sometimes a pinch of salt. Its claim to fame: incredible durability and a shelf life that could rival a Twinkie. This super biscuit was originally developed centuries ago for sailors on long sea voyages, and it quickly became a favorite of soldiers and pioneers as well. Why? Because it could survive months, even years, without spoiling, making it the perfect food for long journeys when fresh ingredients were scarce. Imagine packing your wagon for the Oregon Trail. You'd need food that wouldn't go bad after a few days under the hot sun. Hardtack was the answer. Now, let's be honest, hardtack wasn't exactly a gourmet meal. It was rock hard and practically inedible without some serious preparation. Pioneers would often soak it in coffee or water to soften it up, which also helped wash away any unwelcome critters that might have taken up residence during storage. Some folks would crumble it into soups or stews for a bit of extra heft, or even fry the softened pieces in grease for a touch of flavor. While you won't find hardtack on many dinner tables today, it's a powerful symbol of pioneer ingenuity and resilience. It reminds us of the challenges they faced and the creative ways they found to thrive in a harsh and unforgiving environment. Imagine slicing up apples, peaches, or apricots and laying them out in the sun to dry, or perhaps using a low-heat oven to gently remove the moisture. This process not only prevented spoilage but also concentrated the fruit's natural sweetness, creating a delicious and portable snack. For pioneers traveling the Oregon Trail or settling in remote areas, dried fruits were a lifesaver. They provided essential vitamins and minerals that were often lacking in a diet heavy on preserved meats and grains. Dried fruits could be enjoyed as a quick snack, added to porridge for a touch of sweetness, or baked into pies and cakes for a special treat. Comment 1 if you enjoyed the content above. And don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications to follow our videos. Thank you. Many families recognized the importance of fresh dairy and eggs and brought along cows and chickens on their westward journeys. Imagine traveling the Oregon Trail with a cow in tow. It might seem like a lot of work, but it meant access to fresh milk, a vital source of calcium, protein, and vitamins. Milk could be enjoyed as a refreshing drink or used in cooking and baking. Pioneers also cleverly transformed milk into butter, cheese, and buttermilk, adding variety and extending its shelf life. Fresh butter, especially, was a prized commodity, adding richness and flavor to meals. But milk was more than just sustenance. It was a taste of home, a reminder of a more settled life, offering comfort and familiarity in a challenging new environment. Chickens were another valuable asset for pioneers. Fresh eggs, packed with protein and essential nutrients, were a welcome addition to the diet. They could be boiled, scrambled, or fried, adding variety and nourishment to meals. The ability to gather fresh eggs daily provided a sense of stability and self-sufficiency in an unpredictable world. Of course, keeping livestock on the trail wasn't without its challenges. Cows needed grazing land and water, while chickens needed protection from predators. Pioneers had to be resourceful and attentive to their animals' needs, balancing their care with their own survival. Canned goods. Let's talk about a game changer in the world of pioneer food: canned goods. This revolutionary technology transformed the way folks ate on the frontier, offering a welcome boost to both nutrition and variety. Before canning came along, pioneers relied heavily on preserved meats, dried foods, and whatever they could hunt or forage. But with the advent of canning in the early 1800s, a whole new world of possibilities opened up. The process was simple yet ingenious. Seal food in airtight containers. Heat them up to kill any bacteria or enzymes that cause spoilage, and voila, you've got food that can last for months, even years, without refrigeration. This was a lifesaver for pioneers traveling the Oregon Trail or settling in remote areas where fresh produce was scarce. Canned vegetables like peas, corn, and green beans provided essential vitamins and minerals, while canned meats like beef, chicken, and pork offered a reliable source of protein. Canned fish, such as salmon or sardines, added variety and a healthy dose of omega-3 fatty acids. Suddenly, pioneers could create more balanced and interesting meals by combining canned goods with staples like hardtack or beans. This helped combat nutritional deficiencies and made mealtime a little less monotonous. Canned goods also marked a shift in food culture, paving the way for the modern grocery store and the convenience of stocking your pantry with a wide array of options. Today, we still rely on canned goods for their convenience and versatility. They're a reminder of the ingenuity that transformed the pioneer diet and continue to influence the way we eat today. So, next time you reach for a can of beans or vegetables, take a moment to appreciate the history behind this simple yet revolutionary technology that changed the way pioneers ate and helped shape the culinary landscape we know today.
The American frontier may have been romanticized in stories, but the truth is far harsher. From disease outbreaks to violent encounters, the struggle for survival was constant. Acknowledging these realities not only deepens our understanding of history, but also honors the resilience of those who faced these challenges head-on. If you found this exploration eye-opening, don't forget to subscribe for more in-depth looks at the untold stories and hidden truths of our past.